Sports. I'm Lamont Germany. We move on. And we are so happy to invite in studio here at Inside Morgan Sports, Mr. Marty McNair, the author of The Fifth Quarter, a parent's guide to preparing student athletes for life beyond the game. How he got to the fifth quarter, Marty McNair is a story I'm sure all of you are familiar with. As I mentioned off the top of the show, Marty, it's been 7 years. And I guess my first question for you is, how are you 7 years after the fact?
Man, working hard. I'm doing well. We're doing well.
You've had an opportunity as a result of that experience to kind of focus on what did you want to do in the aftermath. Tell me about the process that brought you from that tragic moment to where you are now.
Yeah, so, and by the way, thanks for having me. I tell people all the time, like, the roughest 2 weeks we ever had in Jordan's life was, in those 19 years, was those 2 weeks he was in the hospital trying to recover from this injury. And every time I would walk in the hospital at University of Maryland, he was in shock trauma, and I would walk down this long hallway to the ICU elevator, and I would go through this really long, these series of range of emotions, from feeling impotent to helpless, and like it was my fault. That's the paternal love, because I didn't prepare him for something. We shouldn't be here. What didn't I prepare him for? So I would go through this range of emotions every day. Then by the time I would get to the ICU elevator, I'd literally have to put my cape back on, the strength, or that mask of strength, to go upstairs for my family. But it was really tearing me up. And one of the questions I kept asking of many was, what did I miss? Meaning, what questions didn't I ask? And if I don't know these things about a heat-related injury, how many other parents in America don't know these things? So I didn't know any statistics or anything like that. Jordan had a liver transplant 3 days after the event. And unfortunately, it was just so much damage that was done that, unfortunately, he just didn't survive the injury, or pass from complications of the injury. And it was, I think when you're in a position like that, you got two options. Either you can deal with what happened and just accept it, or you can deal with what happened and make a change about it. And I decided to make a change about it. I didn't want to go into that rabbit hole of depression and despair that I saw so many other people go into with the loss of a loved one unexpectedly or outside of the life cycle. And I just knew, hey, we got to do something about this. Luckily, my family believed in me enough to support me, to follow my lead in regards to that. And man, we just made a lot of impact over the last 7 years. And a lot of times when you're in the advocacy space, the way some things start out aren't always the way that they finish. So it's kind of like it's a living, breathing document, or a living, breathing movement. So how we went from everything from, I would talk to schools, and we were very, very football centric the first couple of years. And then I started thinking, really, what's making anything I say stick once I leave? The ether's going to burn off. And yeah, some coaches and student athletes, we talking self-advocacy and all these different things, but what's going to make it stick? And then we got into the legislation space, or that legislation arena. I was laughing today because I was telling somebody about a bill that I got passed, our very first bill in Baltimore City, thanks to Brandon Scott. Brandon was city council president at the time. However, I didn't even know what a draft bill looked like. It looked like hieroglyphics to me, right? And I was telling somebody today that something that I can look at now and say, hey, that won't work logistically. On paper, at that time, I really couldn't see it. And, it was a lot of ambiguity. Even though we got this bill passed, it was the Jordan McNair Youth Safety Protection Act. And basically what it did was it really just emphasized a partnership with all Rex and Parks organizations where youth sports organizations play, where they have to have this mandatory training. Now, the interesting thing was, really at that time, I didn't know that, no shade to anybody, but I didn't know that, on paper, saying you're going to buy 100 or 200 AED machines look fantastic on paper. But when you look at it logistically, you're like, well, where are you going to get the money for that at, right? So again, we just went on and on and on, and we continuously made progress. Then we got the Jordan McNair Act passed in the state of Maryland. Then we got the NIL bill, which is Jordan McNair Safe and Fair Play Act. But again, I'm steady learning how to move pieces on the chessboard from a legislative perspective. I think, to me, Our most impactful bill was House Bill 836, where it mandates that all middle and public schools in the state of Maryland have to practice their emergency action plan at the beginning of every spring season and the beginning of every fall season. Now, in our case, Jordan's case, yeah, somebody dropped the ball that day, but it was more of a systematic failure.
Okay.
Taking all emotions out of it, systematic failure. And a lot of times when you look at, unfortunately, a lot of these deaths, a lot of times are systematic failures. And what I mean specifically by that is they had an emergency action plan, right? However, they just never practiced it. That's where the failure was at. That comes from up top versus somebody maliciously saying, hey, I'm going to do something to your kid. You know, when you have, toxic practices and things like that in place, at Maryland at the time, it just wasn't a matter of when it was going to happen. It wasn't a matter of who it was going to happen to. It was just a matter of when it was going to happen.
Are you satisfied that those systematic problems that were in place then have been addressed sufficiently and we're in a better place now, specifically at Maryland?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I was down there last night with Coach Locks in a meeting, and I even if it was from a reactionary perspective, yeah, those systems are in place, or safety systems are in place.
So how fulfilling is it for you to now look back and say, hey, I made a difference?
I think Jordan made the difference. For me, as any parent, we all think our kids are special, as we should. Sometimes we just don't know how special. I thought Jordan had the potential to play on Sundays. I never thought that he'd be the poster boy for student athlete safety across the nation. So, who could see something of that magnitude?
Got my partner in studio, Frank Johnson. I'm sure he got a question or two, observation or two, Marty, to throw your way.
Absolutely. So, Marty, thank you for sharing your story with us. It's always enlightening to hear information like that that's going to impact and change communities from the unfortunate situation that happened with your son. But we also would like to know, what do you do when you come into a situation where some people aren't receptive to what you're bringing to the table with this act?
Yeah, so, for us, we have more of a national reach than just a local reach. So the main thing is, it always boils down to the people that you think, or the organizations that should have the systems in place, don't have the systems in place. So that's where your frustration comes in at. I don't want to, we're always in the process of building relationships, so I don't want to throw nobody under the bus. However, I remember it was a lot of hindsight thinking for me. So I kept saying, what did I miss? But then when I start looking back at it, it was no education. Jordan went to every combine, every brand name you can imagine, every clinic you can imagine. These were significant events, and all the parent ever did was sit in the stands. If a piece of safety equipment, if all the stuff I talked about, it fell out the sky and hit me in the head, I would have never known what it was. And the bigger the events, I was talking to a colleague or a new partner the other day. We do a lot of stuff in Atlanta as well. And I was talking to a doctor the other day, and his son plays soccer at a higher high school level, right? And he said it was 40 countries down there in Florida this week. And I said, Doc, do they have any type of parent education? He said, nope.
So it's always room for growth, which
Always.
is perfect. And
Always.
that's what God does when he turns pain into purpose.
Correct.
Because it's a far greater reach than you could ever imagine.
Yep.
I'm wondering, Marty, what you feel about the current collegiate landscape with all of the changes that have emerged over the past 7 years, NIL and the transfer portal. People come and go. It seems like at halftime, man, you can change teams if you want to these days in college. Almost a completely different landscape than when Jordan was at the University of Maryland. I'm curious about your observations about how things have changed.
Yeah.
The good, the better, or
Man,
a little bit of both?
Well, obviously you got my book right there. That was the purpose of me writing my new book, The Fifth Quarter. And I remember when Jordan was being recruited, he was an Ohio State guy, and he said, Dad, they want me to come up Ohio State. So we took this drive. And I remember Urban Meyer told us that he was the coach to 2016. He said, whatever you do, Mr. McNair, whether y'all come here or not, make sure you get a lifetime scholarship, right? Okay, what's that, coach? And it basically was a 5-year scholarship, meaning If they leave, they can come back, you know, and that was golden. He said, these people gonna get everything they can get out of you, out of your son. Everything. You make sure you do the same. That was the leverage you had when Jordan was being recruited, right? That was it. Now, you know, my new book talks about how to prepare families, not just for the financial aspect of it, but the legal aspects of it, the mental aspect of supporting your student athlete for them to be successful at that next level. That's why, you know, we're putting our very first Kobe Student Athlete Summit together on May 3rd. It's a free event in May 3rd, Saturday, May 3rd from 9 to 3. And we're just inviting parents of high school student athletes in the DMV. The first 300 seats, we got like all of the locals, all of the top schools in DC invited. But whoever registers first, make sure you come out, because these are the conversations that we have. Frank will tell you, Troy will tell you, this is a business now.
Yes,
This is, and if you look at any type of contract without a tax professional and a legal professional, a lawyer, you're gonna get burnt somewhere. Because see, it's a lot of information that parents, we just don't think about. I tell people all the time, at our kitchen table, when the coaches from Maryland were sitting at our table, I asked 2 questions. Can you get some playing time, number 1? And I asked something, not knowing the magnitude of mental health and substance abuse, because I owned a treatment facility at the time. That was it. What could happen at Maryland? Or what could happen at any school? You know, as parents, I think now we're more empowered. Student athletes are way more empowered now to go just beyond. I think empowered from a perspective of knowing their value. I think that they can just be a tad bit unrealistic in their value. Look, when we came along, if you had a free education, you was winning. And you were grateful just to get a free education, because that meant your parents didn't have to come out their pocket with it. Now, kids can make in 1 year what mom and dad ain't never made. And now, you know, the thing is, parents or families have to be more educated from a perspective of, your kid may not make it to the next level, but they're pretty much there if they get this kind of money. Let's make good financial decisions. And a lot of times, if we don't have financial literacy, here we go again, we're going to be, young people don't understand $100 isn't $100.
That is so true. So true.
It's like
Troy, they don't know.
$61.
It's $61.
Yeah,
There you go.
when you pay the taxes. It's
When
like
you pay the
$61.
taxes.
The knowledge that's being dropped is coming from Marty McNair. He is the author of The Fifth Quarter, Parents' Guide to Preparing Student Athletes for Life Beyond the Game. Marty, how big is that information gap as you've engaged with parents? How much is it that they just don't know?
Man, you know, one of the big things, another takeaway for me was, it's huge, right? I always tell people to educate your kids. Everything comes from home. I looked at everything I didn't teach Jordan. That was, you know, one of the things I constantly looked at. And I'd always told Jordan to be coachable, meaning coach say run off that cliff, you run off the cliff. Coach say run through that brick wall, you run through that brick wall. If I had to do it all over again, I would say, son, if coach ain't running through that brick wall himself, or coach ain't jumped off that cliff himself, then you make the best decision for you. Mm-hmm. And that's where it starts at. So somebody asked me the other day, what's the best thing you can tell a parent of a young athlete? And I said, Glennie asked me, I said, man, plant the seed of self-advocacy now, because that's what's going to save their life. Because parents don't understand, the older your kid gets, the smaller your voice gets. Your voice starts to diminish. Meaning, guess what? You got a big voice at the AAU level, but do you really think a high school coach gonna let you run up on them after they just took an L, Troy? They walk away from you. And do you really think if your kid make it to the collegiate level beyond the recruitment table, you think you really gonna share the same air as a college coach? It ain't gonna happen. So you have to plant those seeds of self-advocacy for your child to protect themselves and advocate for themselves, because they can't use our voice after a while. You know, we got to give them the seed or the tools for them to be successful.
And how important is it for the parents to be aggressive in seeking the information? In other words, are the institutions going to be giving and sharing what some of these realities are all about? or the parents going to have to take the bull by the horn themselves in order to educate themselves about the process?
Yeah, well, that's why I tell everybody, make sure you get a copy of the fifth quarter, because that's a guide. That I wrote that for every parent that you just mentioned. That is a guide. Purchase the book at the JordanMcNairFoundation.org. If you got to have it tomorrow, Amazon might ship it faster than me, but at the end of the day, I think it's crucial. It's very crucial because, man, like nowadays, there's no need to not be prepared when you have so much information and resources now. Is the school going to give it to you? Nope. They're not. Do I have mental health professionals from the collegiate level at the summit? Absolutely. So you can at least have some indication of what it looks like to successfully prepare your kid away from home. I'll give you a prime example. A friend of mine, her daughter went away to play basketball in Florida, right? Mm-hmm. And I remember she was telling me her daughter called home when she first got down there. She was hysterical. And she kept saying, what's wrong? What's wrong? She said, they left me, Ma. The basketball team went to the grocery store and left me. So she says, what do you want me to do? Come to Florida and take you to the grocery store? Now, this is real, right? This is real. Now, she said, calm down and get your backpack, hop on your bike, and ride to the grocery store. But at that time, in her daughter's world, that was real.
Right.
And this is the things that we talk about, because at times, if we don't prepare our kids, they can take something so minute and make it a monstrosity event, where in reality, something as simple as that, it's like we have to teach coping skills for real life.
Well, the fifth quarter puts it all in one easy-to-read book. And Marty, I don't know that it exists anywhere else outside of the fifth quarter. Sure. So this is something that parents really, and I guess even the student athletes themselves want to educate themselves about this thing that they're about to get into. You mentioned the foundation. Let's talk about the foundation. Yeah. Motivation for starting it and some of the things that the foundation has done.
Yeah, so obviously, like I say, when Jordan passed, that was very, very therapeutic, and just in regards to the grief, healing from the grief. Mm-hmm. I didn't even realize all the stuff that we had done. I still look up and I'm amazed, like, wow, like we made a lot of impact along the way. We started out really focusing on heat-related injuries, prevention, awareness, that type of thing. And then, you just can't really stay in the heat-related injury space, because cardiac arrest is just as deadly. Concussions are just as deadly. All these different things that really affect young people, especially in the summer seasons. Like, unfortunately, we had a horrible summer last year. Legislation, trained coaches, parents, we got something for everybody, student athletes at all levels. We've been extremely, extremely impactful. 4 laws total. Went to the congressional level just to try to get baseline standard legislation passed, right? Which is somewhat challenging, but at least we got there, right? A guy from West Baltimore was in Congress testifying, Frank. So we've evolved a long way, and the goal for us is really to just keep educating families, educating parents, coaches on student athlete safety, parents on their student athlete safety, student athletes on their own safety, and that's really what we've been focusing on, that type of stuff. Our primary states right now are Maryland and Georgia. Okay. So we've had a lot of success in the state of Georgia, especially around Atlanta, surrounding counties, stuff like that. Man, we've been super busy. We stay pretty busy.
Marty, keep on doing what you're doing, because it's working and it's needed.
Yep, thank you so much.
It is overwhelmingly necessary, particularly in the changing landscape that is collegiate athletics. I can see you're nowhere near stopping. I can see and feel and sense the energy in your soul.
I'm dying on this hill. This is it for me.
There you go.
Yeah, hey, look, I need the foundation to be here, the Jordan McNair Foundation to be here at least 50 years after I'm gone. And that's really where we're going at, for sure.
Yep. Marty McNair, again, the book is The Fifth Quarter, Parents' Guide to Preparing Student Athletes for Life Beyond the Game. Snatch it up, educate yourself. Even if you don't have a young man, somebody who does have somebody. You can help your friend. So this is for everybody. Go ahead, snatch up The Fifth Quarter. Marty, we really appreciate your time.
Hey, man, thanks for having me, man. I'm just glad to be with a great group of brothers doing some big things, man, for sure. Thank you for the platform.
That's what we're trying to do.